Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So, as Florencia mentioned, my name is Joanna Garcia, and I work in our Center for Leadership and Service. I have the pleasure of overseeing our student food pantries on campus, and I'm really excited to talk with you today about a topic that we both feel is really important.
Yeah, so hi everybody. I gotta get near the microphone, thank you. So we wanted to draw your attention to, I get this going, the fact that tomorrow is World Food Day. Is anybody already familiar with this? Yeah? Come on, more people? World Food Day every year since 1945. So the United Nations, which started right after World War II, then established the Food and Agriculture Organization. So that's the world food body at the UN. And so with the establishment of that, then every year on the commemorating the anniversary of that, we celebrate World Food Day. And in schools, universities, businesses around the world, the idea is to bring awareness to the issues at hand. And that's what we're doing today. So World Food Day, there's just... see if that will roll into a little video for us. Types of food of nutritional value. So it's not just quantity, it's quality. Maybe you've learned also in some of your classes, going way back to middle school, about the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So there's 17 goals. This is getting out through schools and through businesses all over the world. Even businesses in my field, hospitality and tourism, are announcing the goals that they're supporting. And in particular, their goals for the year 2030, where we want to be on a number of these issues, 17 of them to be specific. And number 2, in fact, has to do with food. Number 1 is poverty, which leads to food insecurity. And number 3 has to do with health, which can be a result of food insecurity. So these are the top 3 SDGs, according to the UN, are all revolving around the issue of food. So zero hunger. Oh, you've got it. I was trying to figure out how that's moving. So we talk about hunger at the UN level, but we talk about food insecurity in general. So there's a difference between those terms. Hunger, sometimes we just associate that with a lack of food. But food insecurity is more than that. Food insecurity has to do with not really knowing or feeling secure that you're going to be getting food today, tomorrow, in the near future. So, matter of fact, our United States Department of Agriculture defines it just like this. So it's a lack of access, and that can be for any number of reasons, but primarily economic. But there are other reasons you may not have access to the right kinds of food. And you need that on a daily basis in order to be able to lead a healthy lifestyle. It has to be a certain level of nutrition. So all of these things go into what we call food insecurity. Our federal government, through the USDA and through the Census Bureau, then measures food insecurity. And we've been doing this for over 20 years, since 1995. Right now, we're getting better and better and better. We're down to about 11% of our nation can be considered to have some difficulty at some point in the last year or so accessing enough food for the healthy lifestyle that we just described. They do this through a survey. I'm going to put this up, then you got to put it down, right? They do this through a survey that the Census Bureau does every December. And this sort of an additional survey to what the census already covers regarding food insecurity. And they have as there are, I think, 18 different questions on this survey, but there are 3 basic questions. I just want to run through them real quickly. And I wonder if you would just sort of, kind of quietly check that off by yourself and consider this question, not just in the last 12 months, which is the way the survey works, but just look back in your lifetime. Say, any time during my life did I have this, how would I have answered this, right? So were you ever worried, whether the food would run out? Think back to your childhood. I think we can all think of a time that might have happened. Or what we had just didn't last. I just didn't have enough money to get more. And finally, we couldn't afford to get balanced meals. We were getting food, but it wasn't what we would consider today a nutritionally balanced meal. So think about those. So as you saw on the earlier slide, is about 11% nationwide are considered food insecure. Maybe 1 in 8 or so Americans actually self-declare to that category. Here in South Florida, it's just a little bit higher. It's 11.6%. So we're a little bit higher than the national average. And Florida, as a state, is 11.9%. So we're a little bit behind the average around the country. What really worries me here is that children have a higher incidence of food insecurity. See here, 19% right here in South Florida. Now percentages, they kind of come and go, and they don't have that same meaning as the raw numbers. When you look at how many people that actually means, we're talking about over 700,000 people, adults and children, in South Florida, and the 4 counties of South Florida, are experiencing food insecurity at some time during the year. And that's nearly 250,000 children. So this is really continues, we talk about it getting better and better and better, but that's only because the economy is getting a little better each time, and maybe fewer people are out of work, so they're able to access the food. But it continues to be a serious problem that we all have to be really, really aware of.
And so John just talked about some of the national statistics that represent all people, whether they're children, adults. But these statistics that we also wanted to share are specific to college campuses across the nation. So NASPA, which is a National Association for Student Affairs Professionals, did some research back in 2016, and they enlisted some of the universities to answer some of the questions and have students participate in these surveys. And as you can see, one of the things that came out of these surveys was the need to have emergency aid programs. And that's something that a lot of colleges and universities have. And emergency aid can be anything from having a student food pantry on campus to having specific grants or access to one-time money in case of an emergency. This could be, my car broke down and this is impeding me I can't fix it, I can't get to campus, and so that might be determined an emergency. Maybe it's a medical emergency. And so most campuses have some type of emergency aid program. We have one here at FIU. And as you see from the percentages, one of the most prevalent type of emergency aid provided by campuses is a food pantry. And that kind of ties into our conversation with food insecurity. But there are also other grants and things that are available on campus and other college universities to address some of that emergency aid type of needs. This is what specific 43,000 students in about 20 different states answered this particular survey. And as you can see here, 36% of students were food insecure in the 30 days preceding the survey. 9% of them were considered to be homeless at some point during that prior year. So maybe they were needing to stay in their car or with a friend, couch surfing, but they didn't have a secure place to live. 36% of students were, housing insecure, and 22% of community college students were both housing and food insecure. Our percentage, based on some surveys that we've done, is actually a little bit higher than that 36% of students. We have about 40% of food insecure students on campus from what we have determined with some assessment. So in response to some of the needs that we were seeing on our campus and based on some of these national statistics, we have tried to answer by having emergency aid type of programs on our campus, one of those being our food pantries. So we have 2 food pantries on campus, in case you didn't know. One is here, it's located in GC 319. We have one at BBC in WC353 inside the Center for Leadership and Service office, which is the department that I'm a part of and that runs our pantries on campus with the help of many different individuals and supporters on our campus. And so this was our way to respond to some of the issues that we're seeing on campus. By no means is it the only answer or response, but it's one of the ways to start that conversation. And I think we have a question, so I'm going to wait for a mic to come to you so that everyone can get it in the recording. Question? You want to take that one? Where is it? He's right there in the green.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I missed it, but could you define what food insecure and housing insecure actually mean practically?
So food insecurity, I think John touched on it, it's when you do not have enough access to nutritious food for a period of time. So that could be a shorter period, that could be a longer period to lead an active lifestyle. So you're not getting enough food that is seen to be nutritious to lead an active lifestyle.
On a daily basis.
On a daily basis. Housing security, I do not have that definition, and I don't want to misinterpret that definition, but we can look that up for you. Yeah. So these are just some numbers to share with you as far as our usage of the food pantry on our campus, both at MMC and BBC, and then you have some of the total numbers. So if you look at the 2018-2019 academic year, which was the year that we just ended in the summer, in July, we have given out about 31,000 pounds of food to students on campus, and we've seen 5,329 visits to our pantries. So that kind of gives you a sense of, what might be the need and how folks are using our pantries. Based on this, we definitely feel that there is a need to continue and to have access to our student food pantries on campus, which are available to enrolled students.
I wonder if I could add a comment to that. If you look at these raw numbers, it looks like that the demand is just, increasing dramatically. The demand was always there. And we know that from some of the statistics I showed you earlier on South Florida and the state of Florida and the whole country. But the awareness that this service exists, that, the word of mouth gets around and a friend says, you don't have to go without food. There's a resource on campus.
Absolutely. And so to kind of show you a parallel of some of the survey that John shared earlier that was answered by adults or children on a yearly basis in December through the Department of Agriculture, we had in 2018 a survey based on those questions that went out to FIU students. And so these are some of the questions that were asked and how our students that took the survey and actually participated, so not every student participated, not every student chose to answer. This is how some of the students answered. So for example, I couldn't afford to eat balanced meals. There was a 50% response from the students that took that on our campus. And this was at some point during that year. I worry whether my food would run out before I got money to buy more, and that's a 45% positive response on that from students that took this survey. The food that I bought just didn't last, and I didn't have money to get more, and that was a 38%. 3 or more days, did you ever cut the size of your meals or skip meals because there wasn't enough money for food? That was a 28%. Result. So sometimes when we have students or people that are dealing with food insecurity, there will be less meals that they can eat a day to make sure that it lasts, or just, getting one meal a day might just be enough, quote unquote, to keep them through the next day because there's no access to either food or money to purchase more items.
Has it jumped out to anybody that those numbers are more than double the averages for the state, for South Florida, and for the nation? More than double. So the student population really deals with food insecurity, is affected differently than all of the other populations, even the children who have the highest numbers across the general population. Any thoughts as to why? Why do college students struggle with this?
We have someone back there. Florencia back there.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh.
Sure.
Yes.
Having to adjust from eating with a family versus eating by yourself. Mom used to get the groceries. Now you have to get the groceries yourself, and you're not too sure how much you should buy.
Sure. Any other thoughts? I think we have someone back here.
So I was thinking that some people aren't able to qualify for aid specifically, and then they have to cover costs of school and stuff, and then their parents struggle to do that, or they're alone working trying to do it, and then the cost of food is just it's not even factored in, so they're like borderline, and then when you calculate all the costs that they have, it's just not enough.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So not qualifying for financial aid, and then, sometimes students might work, but that's not enough to cover everything, or we have to cover tuition and books first, and then what kind of gives is that day-to-day or week-to-week food intake. Yes.
Lots of food in like university settings is really overpriced, like in
Okay.
terms of meal plans, and
Yeah.
sometimes people might not have the time to like cook for themselves, so they might have like be kind of railroaded towards these more expensive meal options that are unaffordable for people, especially like working class and lower class people.
Yeah, absolutely. One last, two over here, I think.
Certain universities are usually, they can be closed during breaks or other holiday periods, so it may be very difficult for students to access food. And in
Right.
some cases, even when schools open, it may be difficult due to monetary issues. So it may be difficult for them to actually access food because it's for price, as this man mentioned, or it's just very difficult. Have to organize and plan out many things in college life, and it can be very difficult and tedious.
Right. So having, dining areas closed during breaks, which we'll also get to that as it ties into our articles, and not having the access throughout the whole period of time. So we'll take one more here.
I guess. Thank you. Thank you so much. I graduated last year as of December. So November, December. Okay. I don't remember now. But I know that the food pantry was a lot more expensive than the food that we could find around the food court. Around the food court, what do we have? We had pollo tropical. That was the only part where I could go and feed my hunger and calm my hunger. When I was really, really hungry, I've studied 2 days, and I was really hungry. Pollo tropical, that is not healthy. I mean, it's delicious. It's the most delicious thing. Platanitos, pollito, yuca, que rico.
Right.
But that's not healthy.
Right. So not having access all the time to nutritious food. If we have some of the other vendors like A Street Cafe, which has salads and other things, might be closed. So some of the time there's only food that might be delicious but not as nutritious, is what I'm hearing from you.
What I'm also hearing is a term that's used often about the cultural appropriateness of the food. Is it something that makes us feel better? It's something we're accustomed to, we grew up with. And you're talking about some very specific Latin foods that I'm sure a number of people in this audience are going to agree about. That, to you, is better nutrition than some of my gringo foods, you know?
Well, thank you for reminding about that point.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's much better. I'm saying it's
Sometimes we call that comfort food, right? It makes your stomach feel better and it makes your mind feel better. It puts you at ease and allows you to study, work towards your degree without that concern, right? So let's get into the articles then. So we found two very interesting and related articles in the New York Times, one from last year, one from this year, so really very up to date. Anyone had a chance to read? At least the first one was on the link. The second one I think we've passed around. Anyone have a chance to read the first one? I heard a couple of comments already that sound like either you'd read the article or you're right on track with the same topic.
If you got a chance to read, maybe if you had any initial reactions to what you read, something that you could relate to or know someone that could.
Yeah, so I mean, I come from like a relatively comfortable background. Like we were still like surviving like paycheck to paycheck when like back in the UK, but I'm a grad student now, so you know, like when I first started here, I was paying like 865 in rent, and I was making about like 1600 every month. So it was like most of my money was going on rent, so I could afford like $100 in groceries per like month for my budget. So I used the food pantry a lot. But I also used like free food events on campus, like this one. And a big thing that like they don't mention is like it's not just spring break for a week, like when it's these free food events, because the Council for Student Organizations at FIU specifically doesn't fund events during the summer. So like a big access for me to start off with, and I still go to a lot of these things, is like events hosted by societies and events put on by the university that have like free food, because like you know that's
Right.
like lunch or dinner, and there's none of them in the summer, and like I'm still getting paid the same amount, and for lots of people it's you know even harder to get paid. So like especially for people who are here over the summer, it becomes a lot more difficult like during the summer to find good like free food options on campus and sustain themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, yeah, we think of some of the shorter breaks, but then the summer when not everyone is necessarily enrolled in classes, and then maybe some of the other, you know, council for student organizations or other places are not as active, there's definitely also that gap that we see in some of the articles that we read.
So drawing from the first article, which if you had a chance to look at the link ahead of time, you'll connect with some of these. But and also drawing from the questions, the 3 questions that we posed earlier, which are from the national survey. Would anybody care to address this? Anybody want to mention whether they've actually experienced food insecurity based on those definitions? Don't be shy. I think we've all been there one time or another in our lives.
So my parents got divorced, and my dad was in the Air Force, and my mom worked in the law firm. So at one point, we were living with our grandparents, and they were taking care of us. And my grandfather was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So my grandma would always cook, and she really couldn't anymore because she had to take care of him. So then, we had to learn how to cook and make food, and our meals were not that great. So it was basically whatever we could, pasta with anything we could just make easily, and that was what we would eat, and we would even make food for our grandparents too, because I'm sure they didn't like our menu as much as we liked theirs, but you know, but it was.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And so, you know, and it might not be, for some, might not be your personal experience, but, you know, some of us might encounter a friend or, you know, a relative or someone, you know, for those that might work on campus, a student that comes to us to have these type of conversations. So I think one of the things I encounter when this topic comes up is when we first were trying to open our student food pantry, it was this question of, well, you know, how do we know if someone really has a need, and how do we gauge that? And so our practice is, you know, this is a service that we provide for all students. This is, you know, if the student is coming in, we are going to do our best to help them, and we don't really ask for you know, what's your income, what's your need, because that is a best practice, you know, kind of across the way. And, you know, my thought is, you know, if the student is coming in is because they have, you know, whether that's a short-term need or a long-term need. And, you know, we hope that, you know, students that use our pantry in the future, when they're able to, they can always pay it forward by giving back to it after they leave. But it's something that you can't see. It's something that you won't know unless someone shares with you or someone talks about it. So I think that's something important to keep in mind, and not to assume or think, oh, this person looks a certain way, so they might not have this issue. Why are they seeking this particular service? So sometimes you won't be, we won't be able to see it.
So here's where it starts to hit home, is if you are having difficulty even finding culturally appropriate food, which gives you that good, warm, comfort food feeling, how does that affect your studies? You know, when you've got to eat something and then go to the library for 5 hours, 6 hours. Any thoughts on that? Anybody experience that? I know I have. Yeah.
guess that goes back to, the topic of quality versus quantity. It's, starchy foods and foods that are of lower nutrition are usually cheaper and easier to get, especially around campus. Like you have vending machines, you have, like she was saying, like you can get a side of rice and beans at Pollo Tropical for whatever, less than $3. So, that's sometimes what you have to do. However, like that affects your brain function, that affects your physical, strength and just movements in general, and having those quick reactions and just wanting to even study and get out of bed and do those kinds of things
Right.
is difficult when you don't have that balanced nutrition in your life.
Sure.
Thank you for that.
I think I see
Sure.
a hand up here. He's coming.
It is so true, and that kind of food always makes you crave for more. It's impressive, but even though you satisfy your hunger, you don't want anything else. But you at the hour, half an hour, you want more and more, and what do you get? A very low balanced percentage of energy, very high standards of malnutrition and rendimiento cero académico.
Yeah. Yeah, so essentially whether you're getting less nutritious food or whether you're not getting any, not getting in any food or enough food in the day to sit through a study session, to sit through classes, to be able to carry through the day, that is extremely difficult and hard to be successful that way. And so we do see a correlation, between folks that are experiencing food insecurity and that lack of being able to perform in academics or their studies, especially when it's a prolonged amount of days and time.
Hello. I wanted to add also that I'm thinking, okay, so if you have to study but you're hungry and that's your main concern, just your demeanor. Why would you care about what you're reading or what they're teaching you when your primary needs are not being fulfilled?
Yeah, and I wanted to add to the comment about the vending machines and the quick foods. These are quick fixes. So you get some sugar, you get some sodium, but the real nutrients aren't there. And so over the period of time, you realize it's not helping you. But it feels good if just for a short while. So any others? No. Let's get into a little bit more into this article then. So this article from last year, it's hard to be hungry on spring break. And some of the things that have already been mentioned here. It can affect your grades, but it goes beyond that too. It can affect your self-esteem. It can affect your social life, your sense of belonging. When you see friends, coming into this building and going to eat wherever they please, and you quietly excuse yourself and go to wherever you may be able to find the food that you need to get through the day. And again, that may be inadequate nutrition, right? These are some quotes that I pulled out of the article. And this article does focus on spring break, and it's just a week, but that week is when it kind of wakes up a lot of people, because so many of the places that they would normally go to get their nutrition are closed for that week, and so it's a new reality. Or their scholarship may only pay for certain things that aren't open that week, so there are other locations they could go, but then they have to pay out of pocket. So the first one, Ariana says, spring break is the real Hunger Games. And then Valeria says, there's always famine during spring break. And these are people who have experienced that. And maybe they're only experiencing it for that week, and maybe for the other holiday times or over the summer. But those are very, very real for those people. Michael says, I just go to Family Dollar to buy things that I can microwave.
And that sometimes is due to the lack of access of a kitchen. If I don't live somewhere where there's a kitchen, or if I'm also experiencing housing insecurity, like we talked about, maybe I can only do microwavable foods because we have some microwaves in the public spaces on our campuses, but that's not something they have access to on a daily basis.
So Spencer says, now she's actually remembering how she stole food the day before they closed everything. So the day before spring break started, she's scavenging to stock up for that week. That's pretty severe. Michelle brought a strategy she learned when she was living homeless in New York, and found a soup kitchen, or an emergency kitchen we sometimes call them. Has anybody visited one, at least to volunteer and to know what it's like to be in that situation?
So I volunteer at an organization in Wynwood called Pride Lines, and they have a kitchen there, and they have, like, if you're in like the youth and you are homeless, you're experiencing food insecurity, they will provide you with food, emergency meals, like holiday meals, things like that. So Pride Lines. Yes, it's like an LGBT advocacy organization. It's located all over Miami, but they have multiple locations, like 4 of them. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Any
I
other
think there was a hand
experiences?
up here.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was younger, it was a few years back, me and my mom volunteered at a local church. It was located in South Miami. I don't remember the name, but we were volunteered for a month or so, and we were giving out, it wasn't a kitchen necessarily, but it was more of a pantry, and we would give out food to the homeless people that would pass by, and it was a lot. But like we were stocked up on a lot of food, and we were fortunate to give them all out to many people who were homeless, who were trying to find a way, to make a living. Very humbled. So.
Thank you. And I think we have one more. She's got a mic.
Can you go? Okay. So I volunteered with a FIU Med. So I did 2 like volunteering opportunities. One of them was like the Ronald McDonald House of Charities, and we actually like cooked breakfast for families who weren't able to find houses, and women who were like in domestic violence situations, and their children were there as well. And it was a great opportunity. Like, they had food to eat and they were happy. The second opportunity that we did was with Miami Rescue Mission, where we did like a Thanksgiving banquet. So on Thanksgiving Day, we helped serve food to homeless people in the Miami area that didn't have a place to stay. And they also provided like hygiene kits and took them showers as well, and provided clothing for them. So it kind of like opened my eyes to see how many homeless people are in that area, and to have that service and that type of like
Access.
like access to those type of things
Sure.
for people who don't have money to buy.
You mentioned the Thanksgiving outreach at Miami Rescue Mission. I do a lot of work there. I take most of my students go with me or on their own to Miami Rescue Mission to serve a meal, because that's where they really get to understand, as you did, what the face of hunger is. And most of the comments I've been hearing here have equated homelessness with the visit to a pantry or to the soup kitchen, but that's not always the case. That, it may be, but there are a lot of people who are just plain food insecure and just need a meal. They may have a place to stay, they may have an apartment, and they can, they're making ends meet on the rent, and there's no money left for food, or they have food up to a certain point. Some people are living on SNAP benefits, what we used to call food stamps, and food stamps or SNAP benefits are put on a electronic card, an EBT, which eventually run out. It's a certain amount that's placed on the card, and it's placed on it the first of the month. So it's something my students pick up on right away, or if they don't, I let them know. When we're at Miami Rescue Mission, if it's early in the month, there are fewer people in line, because they just got their SNAP benefits, if they're getting those benefits. And you go late in the month, and the lines are much longer, and you'll see people that you didn't see there all month. So homeless people might come in, every couple of days for a meal there. But people who are food insecure only for a few days the month, maybe the last week of the month, that's when they start to show up there.
Yeah. I think something also to mention, as I heard some of the comments of where you have volunteered, is that some of these locations are not always open to college students. And the reason for that being is that for some locations, you might need to be in a specific bracket. And so someone might say, well, this person is in college, their parents make enough money based on their income taxes, and we know that that's really subjective, because enough is not really enough for what most people need. And so, if you go into certain spaces, you don't qualify for it. And so that's also something to think about. That's why when it comes to university students, we see that they have less access to these places and these nonprofits that can serve food, but might not meet the requirement. Something that we try to do to make available at the pantry is try to look at a list of locations within like a 15, 20 miles radius from campus and see what places offer food to provide that supplemental need that might not be getting met by what we have with the food pantry. And so that might be some of the churches, some of the local churches might offer some food on a certain day of the week. They have a distribution. I know San Agathas across the street does that, I think on Wednesdays. I have to look at my list. But we have also tried to gather some of that information and which other places are open to kind of anyone without meeting a specific criteria, like being a child or being a senior citizen, because we find that it's harder for the college age students to find some of those places or to visit because they might not meet a certain requirement. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that are going around in addition to what we've already mentioned, but to support the pantries and to support the students who are going to the pantries as a source for nutrition. And maybe it's better that you speak about this since you're the authority on it, but I'll be glad to chime in on the parts that I'm familiar with.
Yeah. So some of the initiatives that we have started to do is our Adopt a Month initiative, and that is where a department, college, unit, student club can sign up to adopt the pantry, one of the pantries, whether a MMC or a BBC. And that just means that through that month, that particular group of people is doing a drive, a collection, an internal way to gather items to donate to the food pantry. I know Hospitality, and John can talk about this, has signed up to do this in November, and they actually also did some in October. So that's one of the ways that we're getting a lot of support from the units on campus, and also some student groups are able to help. And that's on an annual basis. So let's say I signed up for October. That means next October, we'll send you a reminder like, hey, your department is signed up to do a drive. It doesn't matter. There's no quantity. We take as much or as little as the department is able to provide, or their student club. So this is a way that if you're part of a student organization on campus or just want to get together with some friends and do something like that, you can be a part of. We also take donations at any point, so you don't have to adopt a month to donate. But that is one of the ways that we try to keep the consistency to make sure that we are stocked as much as possible. The library has done food for fines in the past years, and they typically do it in the spring semester in March. So that means that students that maybe have fines that they haven't paid, they'll get an email and saying that instead of paying their fines, they can bring like a non-perishable item of food to donate, and that will kind of waive their fee for that they had in the library. So that's one way that they have tried to help, and also kind of helps the students that might not have to pay the fine, but then are doing something else to give back. We have, different special events to stock the pantry, and I'm going to let John talk about one of the recent ones that we did. This is just the Adopt a Month flyer and some of the drives that some of our group students have done as an example of what we were just sharing.
I think the Department of Social Work is one that I'm familiar with that has adopted a month. Let's see. Do we have anybody here from social work? Can you tell us about your experience with supporting the pantry? Not to pick on you, but I saw you there.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we've adopted for many years now, I believe, the month
Yes.
of October, and we create a flyer not only to our current students, but those that have graduated. I knock on their doors also, our faculty, staff, so down the line. Last year, we had a very good turnout. I actually knocked on one of our PhD grads, and he donated $400, and my son and I had the pleasure of going and purchasing, on his behalf. And SSWA Phi Alpha, which are student organizations, they are active. All donations for the month of October come to my office and throughout the year. So my office looks wonderful. And we have the staff sometimes come and pick up because it's excessive. So that's a good thing to say. And throughout the year, anybody that's here on Academic Health Center 577, you're welcome to drop off items at my office. If it's difficult to walk to the actual Graham Center and drop off. So we have collected and continue to collect throughout the year. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Gladys.
Thank you. Gladys has inspired me too, because I was one of those doctoral students way back when, right? And she got me thinking about it. And now that I'm teaching at the chaplain school over on BBC, we decided then to adopt a month too. So next month, my school will be supporting the pantry for the entire month of November. And originally we thought October, and then we had a big event that generated a lot of food. Oh, there it is. And then we found so much food for October, we moved it to November, and we kind of liked the idea of that too because of the impending holidays of November. So, in the end of the school semester when, some students are running out of funds. So we thought November is even more important than October. So, we're supporting on the Biscayne Bay campus, you're supporting on this campus. And we really want to encourage, I don't think all the slots are picked up yet. So, go back to your advisors, your deans, your professors, your club presidents, what have you, and get engaged and just pick a month. And it doesn't matter how much or how little you're able to generate, but the awareness can go a long way. And it's going to help a few fellow students for sure.
Yeah, if you're ever curious as to what months maybe need more help than others, because we do have some months that have, different departments that have signed up, you can always reach out to me, call our office, the Center for Leadership and Service, and I can tell you, based on the campus, when do we have a need or more of a need than other months. So we're happy to do that.
Special events are a really good way too. So it doesn't have to be an entire month. It could be just one specific event. There was a poster earlier, I think the fraternities and sororities had gotten together and supported the Pantry through an event. And we were fortunate just a few weeks ago to have been approached by a corporation that was holding a meeting in Miami Beach, and they said they wanted to give back in some way. And it was a young group, and they were a well-educated group, and they said they were familiar with this issue, and they wanted to contribute to FIU in some way. And so we connected and got together with the Food Pantry Administration and the Chaplain School and CASE and put together this really marvelous event where all the participants basically after their meetings came into this ballroom. We had everything set up for them. We had the food all donated in advance, and then they paid for some additional themselves. And they walked through and prepared bags. And I think we ended up with 922 individual bags of groceries for students. More of the snack variety, things that they could, open quickly and have, before going to class, power bars and little fruit cups and things like that. And they specifically chose those items because, they were a young group, well educated. They'd been to college very recently. A lot of them were MBAs. And so they still had in memory those late nights studying and what sort of things would work for them. And so it was really a very successful event. We found enough food to actually fill both pantries. So we had one truck went to MMC and the other one to BBC. So we were pleasantly surprised at the turnout and what it generated.
Other ways to support, and we have, at FIU, we have the Ignite campaign, which is our university's fundraising campaign, and there are many different projects that faculty, staff, students, and outsiders too can donate to. The FIU Student Food Pantry is one of those projects, so sometimes I get questions as far as like, oh, I might not want to go buy food, or I don't want to bring all this food. Can I, donate funds? And the answer is yes. There's a place online through Ignite where you can donate funds, and we use those funds to be able to purchase food and to be able to keep the food pantries open.
So for our promotion for next month, we're actually going to reach out to our online students, and we have online faculty who are based in other parts of the country who teach for us. And, they won't be able to come in and drop off a few, cans or boxes of food, but they will be contributing virtually through that connection. So we're excited to be able to, really reach out to everybody in our school, no matter where they're studying from, where they're logging in from. Anybody else have some experience with putting together an event like this that they'd like to share, or some idea of something they'd like to do? Member of a club?
Well, our office, the Office of Global Learning Initiatives, if you're a Global Learning Medallion, or if you're not, you can still pass by PC 244 and drop off some items. If you're a Medallion student, we are offering extra points.
I think we have a question up here, or a point. Let's see.
So I don't know if I should come talk to you after or not, but we're in the nursing program, and I'm a fundraising chairperson there, and Rachel is the community chairperson over there.
Awesome.
We wanted to see if we could do something to help too, but while I was sitting here, I have been toying with an idea before also, and I was thinking to see, I was thinking maybe we could get a vending machine. That I see that there's a big issue with vending machines, and a lot of them don't take cash or don't take credit cards and don't take things, and the selection is terrible. Maybe we could see if we could get a vending machine put in, and the profits from there would go straight to the food pantry to like help out with like bringing more food again. But the vending machine could have like protein bars, like fortified cereals, like milk, like smoothie juices, like nutritious things inside of there that could help address the problem with the summer and spring break. Also, like 24-hour access to something at a good price, and maybe we could see if we could get like sponsored by some companies that can help bring in some things, and like they could write it off on taxes, and it could help, and it could all like maybe it could do something.
Maybe, no, that would. That sounds great to me.
Yeah, I think logistically, yeah, we would have to look at different things. It's not a bad idea, but yeah, it would entail a little bit more, so that would be a lot more conversations. But it's a great idea, yep. Definitely. And so also, just so you know, too, the College of Nursing, they do a great job with the Adopt a Month. And so in the month of September, they have, donated a lot of donations. So I don't know if your student group is already connected with them, but making sure that you keep that connection too.
We heard from nursing, we heard from social work. Anyone in dietetics and nutrition? Be a pretty much of a direct connection with this topic. Anybody? I know last year I remember working with the SDA on some initiatives, but I haven't talked to anybody this year. So I'd love to meet you if anybody's here from dietetics and nutrition. Any other comments? Any other clubs or organizations you're part of, or maybe something in the dorms if you live in the dorms?
Well, I had a kind of like an idea for the dorms. I don't know if you partner with the vendors on campus, maybe having them contribute the leftover foods that they have at the end of the day, like chilies and the new vendors to donate.
Yeah, that's something that we're trying to do. It's something that it's being worked on. When and how it will happen, it's still up in the air just because of the logistics of how to rescue food and how to give it out in a certain amount of time and some of that logistic piece. But it's definitely an idea that John is very passionate about, and we're in contact with Charwells on campus.
Yeah, so we are working on that. If you're interested, come and see me afterwards, and let's get connected.
Another idea is that at Jackson Hospital, there nearby is Camila's house. Camila's house was founded by FIU. And there is you choose your month, you choose your program of where to, when, and what to donate. And there's a connection between Camila's house and FIU because the head of French in my department where I studied, it has a key. Cause como she's like the key for the access of the donating part, Maria Antonieta, and she has a lot of issues to do with connections of when and how I program to choose to donate at Camila's house.
Okay, thank you.
Founded by FIU.
Great.
Camilla's House is another great one that you can volunteer at, you can donate at, and if you're in need, you can go there and ask for help. The head of food service at Camilla's House, by the way, just graduated in spring with his master's from my college, Hospitality and Tourism Management. So we're really proud of him.
Are there any other questions that you might have as we get ready to wrap up for the day? We have some resources up here in case you want to look up more information. These are some of the organizations or some of the places where some of the statistics and research that we showed you came from. So you can just do a quick Google search on some of these to find that. Gladys?
I wanted to encourage everyone that can to actually volunteer. I think being there and actually volunteer opens your eyes in a whole different way. I volunteered where it was at DM, and what is now in GC is day and night. So also the look of it, thank you so much, Joanna, and your team, because it does make a difference for those individuals in need.
Thank you. Yeah, and for those that might not know, before we moved to GC 319, the pantry on this campus was in a room in DM 166, which was very different, a lot smaller, and a little bit gloomier and not very nice looking. But that was a space that we could get at that time. So we are fortunate to be able to get a different space to expand. And we hope to continue to, expand. If you're students, one way that you could always help is to continue to be advocates for the food pantries on campus and the importance of maintaining them and allowing them to continue to expand.
Any last comments, points, anybody?
Thank you all for being here. If you have questions, we'll be here.
Thank you again.